Okay, I will say this again. If you are booted out of the session, just go ahead and log back in, and I will pay attention to the waiting room so I can make sure you get back in. So welcome to week 2, and a little closer to staying on some sort of guideline schedule for getting our discussions done. So I hope you had a good break, if you had one, if you were able to get a break over the holiday weekend. Um, I did get 1 or 2, I think people say something about issue with the pre-survey from last week. It does have the wrong due date on there, but that shouldn't affect you. So, but thanks for letting me know and cluing me in. And I also got a few people, so this is my little recap here, week 2. I also got a few people sending me assignments. Calm down, they weren't due yet. So this week you will submit the, however it is you decide to get your evidence that you completed the writing logs, and you will see here in week 2, there's a submission links. So if you don't see a submission link and you're 100% something is due, I may have forgotten to turn it on. And if so, that's my fault. But usually you won't find them until the week that they're due. So these are the 2 links here. And so remember, I've extended our submission deadline during the week. Instead of asking you to submit these writing logs on Thursday, you have until Sunday. So that gives you a little time, even though we'll be talking about them during the week. So that's why you have that Sunday. You can always submit things early. I will tend to wait until the due date because sometimes people submit things early and then there's an error or something and I've gone and evaluated it and then they'll go and submit the right version. So kind of don't want to put my effort into evaluating something. So I will usually wait. I don't grade them as soon as they pop up, just because sometimes people need to put in another version of something. So I think those were the major questions. And today, I do want to talk a little bit about, we're going to get through the Zinsser essay, and then we're going to do some of the, maybe at least one of the practices from chapter 1. And we will also hopefully do something from chapter 2. When I say we're going to do the practices, that mainly means discuss them. So hopefully you'll have them done and we are just talking about what you're getting from them. So if that makes sense. So people coming in. Hey, if you just joined, remember, whenever you join, post your last name and then your opening comment for attendance reasons. Do I have any questions about the alternative attendance? So if there is a question, you can just unmute yourself. I just want to make sure everybody gets that option, which I just had to create because of COVID times, basically, and giving people a way. All right, Katie, you have a question?
Yeah, so there's 2 chapter writing logs due this Sunday?
Yes, because chapter 1 only had 5, so.
No, they had 9, actually.
I know, but I only said you had to do 5, so.
Well, I did all 9.
And if you did all 9, I said, it's great that you should, and had I counted correctly, I would have said do them all, but I'm not gonna penalize people for having only done 5.
Okay.
Any other questions?
All right, that's all.
Okay. Anybody else? You're all good on the, I'm gonna assume you're good on the alternative attendance. I'm nervous about that, but if you don't have any questions, I'm gonna move on with my life.
The what?
Excuse me?
The what?
The alternative attendance option. Like if you miss class because we have to come virtually.
Oh, all right.
So you have the option, if you don't attend a session like now, you miss it, I record them so you can sort of recover your attendance by looking at the recording and yeah. All right, cool.
Cool.
Okay, so I asked you to go ahead and walk yourself through the I can't ever say this man's name, Zinser document. And I just want to make sure that we are on the same page as we talk about it. I'm using this as sort of an anchor text. So by anchor is like, I want us to approach writing this semester as this craft. I don't want anyone to feel overwhelmed like you have to do something the right way. It's a craft. You have a whole bunch of set of tools. Sometimes you have to create tools specifically for the task at hand. But before we start creating tools, we want to know what exists. And so Zinser gives us a way. His essay is about nonfiction writing, and he stresses that. However, writing, even creatively, I think they all are in the same sort of realm. So the things he tells us about nonfiction writing applies to what you're doing. So Zinser says that writing basically is ultimately about you, and I feel that's, and I could be wrong, but as a creative writer, I feel this is true too. It's very much true. When I sit down to write something creatively, it is as much about me. Sometimes it feels more about me than if I'm having to write some like academic paper or a nonfiction essay for a class or publication or something. But ultimately, we're presenting ourselves, and we want to bring the audience in. And some of the things Zinser says about the people the writers who catch his attention is, he says, what holds an audience, including himself, is the enthusiasm that the writer has for what he or she is doing. And you can tell that when you engage with it. So you ask, how is the writer drawn into what he or she is doing? How is the emotional, how do they reach you through emotional means? And then the writer thinks about like, how is this writing that they're doing a part of, the person's life? So those kinds of ideas and thoughts. So the question here is, if people are asking these types of questions about the writer, what then do they expect from us as a writer? So, and if that writer is you, what are people asking of you? And his response basically is, they're asking you to take them somewhere. Either if we're writing for, make sure you have muted yourself, because I hear some like background noise. So if you're not muted, mute yourself. So taking us on a journey, the writer takes us on a journey. So you're asking, they want to go somewhere with you. They pick up something that you're writing, and often we might write without having an audience in mind, but we do want to take someone somewhere, even if that person is ourselves. So I love writing because you always have an audience, even if that audience is you. If you think about, if you write journals or diaries, or you keep track of your thoughts over time, you have an audience. Now, audience is going to be some future version of you. And if you've ever gone back and read something you've written or found in your childhood, you often are reading that as not you, but as the audience who can gather something about that person. So we always have this idea of an audience. And so Zinser tells us that, look, his position is that they want to go somewhere with you. When we write, we ask people to come along on some sort of journey. And this is interesting because in our textbook, you actually have, there is a form or a genre of writing which is about a journey in and of itself. So that format of writing a poem or fiction, the format is called the journey. So that kind of goes with directly what he's saying. So we want to be able, we make some sort of decision. So are we bringing people on an educational journey, an informative journey, a scary journey, a journey of fantasy? So, but the thing is, we want to take them somewhere. So how can we as writers create experiences, journeys? How do you do that if you're not doing that from some sort of space of personal investment. How you're doing that if it's only to see how many something you can sell. So his point here is it's impossible. If you're really engaging your writing, you can't do this without having some sort of personal transaction. And this personal transaction of humanity. So ultimately, we want to connect with someone else through ideas. We have this writer-audience interaction. Is a personal interaction that's at the heart of good writing. Out of this personal interaction, we get two qualities, because humanity and the warmth of it. So we extend, hopefully, we're extending our humanity, we're growing something, we're not limiting it. Now, there is writing that does that, but his perspective is that it's about extension and inclusion. So my question to you is, you looked at this already. Does this make sense to you? If so, yes. Why? If no, why not? And this is the part where I wait for, if I can get at least, at least two people to say something would be good. If it makes sense to you, yeah.
He or she is. Sorry, I'm just trying to reflect on this for a second.
All right. If it makes sense to you, go ahead and click in the participants area. Just click yes. If it doesn't, click no. And then we just get a quick sense of who it makes sense to or not. This idea of this personal transaction. All right, majority, one person. And it's okay for it to not make sense. We're gonna come back to this at the end of the semester at different points, and hopefully at one point we'll get like everyone to say, yeah, I kind of get it. That's different from whether or not we agree with it.
I mean, it kind of does and doesn't. It depends on what the writing is, really.
Well,
like what
yeah,
genre
exactly.
or whatever.
But he's talking about, like, from the perspective of what good writing is. It is, if it's meant to be, these are the three things he also says. That it has this sense of aliveness that keeps the reader moving in some way, from word to word, from paragraph to paragraph. Good writing is not about gimmicks. Good writing, he deduces, has these 4 principles. So those 4 principles are simplicity, clarity, brevity, and humanity. And each of these principles have, sets of techniques and tools that you can use. So when we look at simplicity, one of the things he says is you want to strip your writing down before you build it back up. You want to know what the essential tools are and what job those tools are designed to do. This is the kind of stuff that's happening in the practices. So we don't start class with say, hey, everybody go write a sonnet. No, we're starting with like some basic, simple tools which you can use to build. And he uses the carpentry metaphor, is that it's first necessary to be able to saw the wood neatly and drive nails before you're going to start, creating some complex designs. And to that, we should not forget that we are practicing a craft. We're practicing something based on a set of principles. And so if our basic understanding is weak, then what we build will be weak. But the idea here is not like, you may not, like for me as a dyslexic learner, there's some parts of how I engage with language which will forever be weak. I'm not going to be able to fix that. However, what I can fix is I can be aware of my weaknesses, and I can engage with other writers who have those skills to help me strengthen those areas. So this is not about you fixing everything that you're weak in and only focusing on your strengths. It's about you being able to identify what your weaknesses are and build a work plan around it. And so mine is, like, for example, one of the things I do all the time, no matter what kind of writing I'm engaged in, is I often leave out connecting words. Like, and it, and so anything that's like a coordinated conjunctions, like they just don't exist in my brain, even though I know they're real. So several years ago, I just gave up on me trying to fix that. And so when I am working in workshops or with other writers or with the editor, I'm like, yeah, you're going to need to go through and find all those connector words that I left out. That way I can move on. But I can, if hopefully that makes sense. So this idea of simplicity, clarity, and this is basically, this is what you're doing on paper. Paper, when you're writing, it's just taking your thoughts and trying to transpose those, you know, using words. And that is very difficult because our thoughts tend to be complicated. And when you go to write them down, when you go to write down complicated things in a poem, in a play or whatever, it is a lot of work to be able to unpack that and get those complicated thoughts in order, in character, in plot, in scenery, and background, and all this stuff very clear on paper. But his point about clarity is, and this may be helpful for some of you, is it is about reproducing your thoughts on paper, taking something that's complicated and then reproducing it in an engaging way on paper. And it's also a way of getting our thoughts out clearly and reworking them in our mind. And for me, that's a process of revision. So if I rethink something, I'm revising and I'm trying to get my thinking clear. But I don't get my thinking clear just in my head. I get it through writing. So one of the things he says, if we can think clearly, we can write clearly, and you can write about anything. And the idea of taking readers on a journey still, but step by step through some topic in some way that engages them and evokes either them thinking a certain way or feeling a certain way or loving the characters in your play or hating them. All that is this whole complicated idea, and the idea of focusing on each of those pieces. How do you clarify those? So it's a process, and it's not something that you're gonna just poof magically do overnight. Brevity, this part I don't like. Because brevity has to do with like all of the rules of writing. I should say I don't like it. I like parts of it because I love words. So I know that the more like knowing the meaning of words, like you can do so much when you know just what words mean and how they work together and how to combine them. But you also need readers who know this stuff too. So that's why we have to be as good, do well in reading as we do in writing. But one of the things he says about brevity is that, and he even says this is sort of a gray area. So it's kind of like, well, what is good usage? What is good English? Do you need to know like the laws of how to combine, you know, words and sentences, and you need that grammar and all of that. But I really like that he focuses on vocabulary. So you need to know the old and new meaning of words to do that. And that's how you can come up with new things, new ideas, and communicate, give people a different way of thinking by building your vocabulary in a sense. And don't be like overly picky or overly married to what words mean, because they change over time. And writers, we help influence those changes. But one of the things he says about brevity is that the more you know about the rules, the more efficient you can communicate ideas. This doesn't mean that you write everything in short, choppy sentences. Because depending on what you're trying to communicate, it may be a long passage, but that long passage has the best approach of using the laws of language at the time.
Sorry for sneezing a minute ago, by the way.
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
Sorry for sneezing a minute ago.
Oh, okay, no worries.
Did you not hear it or?
No, I didn't.
Okay. I heard you laughing like.
But
so I thought you heard it.
Of making sure you're muted. So if you're muted, we won't hear you sneeze.
Sorry.
The last point here is on humanity, and there's a lot, and I hope we're going to come back to some of his text throughout the semester. I'm still actually working through it because he has a lot to say about this last concept of humanity and this personal transaction of writing, because this is where you get to talk about well, how you see yourself. So the writer, how does the writer envision him or herself? How do you see your audience? How does style work? The style of your approach to something. This is something that I get students get really personally attached to and upset when I'm trying to push them out of their, this is what I do because this is just my style. So it's about trying and taking some risks to do something different. And then also this idea of humanity and this personal transaction requires you to develop a vision of purpose. And like I said, we're going to try to develop this throughout the semester. But overall, what I got from, and again, I discovered his text just earlier this summer, and I really like it. So you're working through it with me. So basically he says that this craft, this writing is a craft, and we can all improve if we work on some fun foundational tools. Those tools, words, practice using those words, practice with attention, so paying attention to what you're doing, and practice with intention. What is it that you intend to be the result? And the last tool, which I think is, like, for me, really crucial to think about, is having a sense of audacity that you are even risking this endeavor to put yourself out there. So using these tools, we practice using words and combining that with our audacity, just our sheer willingness to put ourselves out there as writers. And this combination, it makes us want to put words through as many breathtaking loops as possible with the purpose of improving our ability to write well. And so this just short overview is, I want you to, when you are getting stuck or in places, like you're building a craft, which of these practices, what of the mini lessons, what of the discussions you're having with each other are concrete tools that you can use over and over and over, and basically by the end of the semester, customize some things for yourself as a writer. That's my overall Zenser mini lesson that we hopefully will come back to repeatedly during the semester. So what I want to do now is I usually ask you to spend some writing time. And actually, before I get to the writing time, I do want to do one of the practices. And I'm hoping this is going to work and you can hear my audio when I play this. So the writing practice we're going to review is from our text. I don't know what page number it is in the text because I'm using the online version right here and it has different page numbers. But this is the one where you were asked to bring in, if we were in class, bring in a piece and read it to someone out loud and see if they could visualize anything. So this is out of chapter 1, I think.
That's practice number 2.
Okay, thank you. It's the moving images. And since we're not in class, I don't know how creative you got with doing this. When I did this, I just made my family members listen to it and then ask them the question. So I'm gonna do this with a poem with you all, and then we're gonna move to some writing time. So
Okay, so we're not doing the piece of creative writing ourselves.
Yeah, no, you're gonna do this right here on the spot. I'm gonna share a piece with you and see if you can see something in the screen of your brain based on this piece I'm going to share. It's not mine, it's a favorite piece. It's by Gwendolyn Brooks. It's a poem called We Real Cool. It's actually somewhere in our book. And I'm not going to read it because I don't read it as well as she does. So as you listen to it, so you are all my partners in this when you're thinking about the section of the text about moving images. So do you see anything? What does it think? What does it have you? What kinds of images does it put in your brain? Or maybe it doesn't put any. Maybe I picked a piece that doesn't have very many moving images. And then I'll share with you what my family members said. All right, so I'm going to play this and hopefully you can hear it.
We real cool. The pool players, 7 at the Golden Shovel. We real cool, we left school, we lurk late, we strike straight, we sing sin, we thin gin, we jazz June, we die soon.
Were you able to hear it?
Yeah, I was.
Okay, so that's it. I'm gonna play it one more time because it's really short. And this time, does it give you any moving images?
No, not really.
I'm gonna play it one more time.
We real cool. The pool players, 7 at the Golden Shovel. We real cool, we left school, we lurk late, we strike straight, we sing sin, we thin gin, we jazz June, we die soon.
And here's the poem written.
Okay, because she, like, I don't know how to, I guess it wasn't really, I had trouble understanding exactly what she was saying because of the way she said
So,
it, I guess.
Well, yeah, and that's why I want
like
you,
montage in my head. I don't know if that really counts, but
anything, all we're doing here is thinking about the section in the text that talks about how, moving images work. So it doesn't need to make sense, but do you see or hear, do you get a picture of anything in your mind? And the answer to that is pretty much just a yes or no. And so here is the poem written. And then when you listen to it, so I wanted you to be able to see it. And then I'm gonna put down everybody's responses. I'm gonna clear all responses. And see if I can get both of these up here at the same time so that you can hear what she's saying and then read it.
We real cool. The pool players, 7 at the Golden Shovel. We real cool, we left school, we lurk late, we strike straight, we sing sin, we thin gin, we jazz June, we die soon.
Okay, so using the yes or no on the chat, just yes or no. All right, looks like I got. So I got the majority of people saw some sort of image. And when I made my family listen to it, it was my daughter who's 26 and my husband. They both saw something. My daughter saw the cool kids. She's like, she actually saw images of the kids she thought were cool when she was in school. And my husband always got to be the center of attention. He said he saw the cool kids too, but it was himself. So I thought that was an interesting take on it. And so what I like for us to do next is you can take the next 15 minutes. This is why I try to always give you some writing time. In this 15 minutes, you can either do any practice that you still have or have not done, or you can do, if you haven't looked at these, if you haven't explored, what I'd like you to do is the Poetry Foundation. That's where I got that piece from. And it's just a collection of lots of poems. Explore that and see if you can find anything that you think you might find people in there that you like, or any piece that you think may have images. So you can either work on a practice for the next 15 minutes or search that poetry site, because when we come back, and then we're going to come back together, and then we're going to talk about, I'm going to ask you to share practice, I don't know the number, the last practice in chapter 1, which was about flow, I think. Yes. So the last practice in 1 asks you, when were you last in flow? How do you know when you were in flow? Have you had a flow experience as a writer in any parts of your life? So we're going to, that's the one we will be discussing. But I'm sending you away, and I'm going to put you into groups for the next 20 minutes. You have 15 minutes to write, and then the last 5 minutes, you're going to talk about what you did, and you're going to talk about this flow practice. Questions? So you have 15 minutes to work on any practice or explore the Poetry Foundation site. And then the last 5 minutes, I'm gonna give you 20 minutes. The last 5 minutes, you're going to talk and share whatever it is you did with each other during that time, by also focusing on the last practice talks about flow in chapter 1. And then we're gonna come back as a big group and do a report out. And I might pop into your groups in the last 5 minutes. I don't usually get into all of them, but you might just see me appear in your groups. So it looks like you're gonna be in groups with 3 to 4 people in it. This is gonna be random. I'm going to set your time for 15 minutes. I'm sorry, I'm gonna set your time for 20 minutes. You have 15 minutes to write. And then the last 5 minutes, you're gonna come back together to talk. And part of that talk will be you discussing the last practice in chapter. Right, and if you get, now I'm going to hit open room, so look for your invite so you can click on it and go to your randomly selected group.
There you are.
So that's what we're going to do. That's how we kind of manage our large group. So what were your takeaways? I love this question about flow. So I'll save my comments to the end and see what you all discussed. So you had two things in a very short amount of time. You could share what you did during your 15 minutes of writing and then try to squeeze in a discussion of that, the idea of the flow. So who'd like to start?
I actually have a question, but I will speak first.
Okay.
What was my question? Sorry. Oh, I did practice number 4, the one where we have to come up with the 75 potential writing topics. I was wondering if there are some sections where I can't quite think of 15. Is it okay to have a little less in some or no?
Oh yeah, it's so this book is sort of designed to get you started on these practices, and you may not necessarily come up with all 25.
Okay.
But you can come back to throughout the course of the semester. But when you submit it to me, I'll see you have started.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, but that's what I worked on actually during that. So.
All right. And did you all have a discussion about flow? How'd that go?
It's basically from our group, what I heard was that once you get started, like it might be hard to sit down and focus and start on it, but once you get started, it's easy to just get like lost in the writing and continue to go. Like one person in my group, he said he wrote almost a whole page for his first practice, and I don't think he'll do that anymore, seeing how many practices we have, but yeah, but that was basically it for our group.
I think I heard part of that discussion. It was like, yeah, I don't think I could do this forever. Well, okay. Other people? And I see several hands went down, so you're happy with what she reported. Okay. Let's hear other folk. I'll call name. Adam, how about your group?
Sure.
Your group.
Yeah, we didn't actually have any conversation about flow itself. We kind of did the sharing portion.
Okay.
And we didn't really have too much time for everybody to share. We did have a very good discussion about the piece that was shared, though.
Okay.
Katie shared a poem that she wrote, and we had a pretty deep discussion about that, and we all enjoyed the imagery. So.
But well, my screen is. Oh, I was like, what is going on? Someone sharing the screen. Okay. But that's fine, because the conversation that you had, at least you still framed it in, the content in the chapters that we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. If someone shared and you were still able to talk about like images and things like that. So that will happen sometimes. I think as we get more into our own rhythm of doing this, we'll be able to manage time a little better. And even if you go off mark of what I asked you, as long as it is, sort of contained in at least the topic at hand, the chapters that we've either reviewed or we're in, that works well. And then you'll get a sense for, trying to give everybody a chance to get some words in there. And sometimes you'll get cut off, so that happens.
Yeah, this is the poem I shared with everyone.
Okay.
I actually made it into an image too, literally. I edited something.
Well, that's, I guess, that gives you a lot to talk about in the small groups. So thanks for putting that up. I guess I should put an area where you can make sure that you can upload things to share and continue if you want to continue talking offline. So I see some other hands went down. So that means I still should have 4 other groups, because I had 6 groups this time.
I mean, I could go next.
Okay.
Devil said I'll continue the show. In all honesty, we spent most of the time, at least I took it, like we talked about our flow, and we all had different versions of flow. Wouldn't you guys agree?
Yeah.
And that's the point. I wanted to hear some just report outs of like, I know you shared yours, but did you hear anything that helped you even understand this concept, or how other writers come to this idea of flow? So this is just sort of like a quick report out of that. Like, did you have any aha moments, or was it just nice to hear other people get either?
I mean, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off,
Oh, go ahead.
I liked your method, Thomas, where you said you would just sit in bed and think, because I've done that. Well, except the thing is, when I'll do it, I'm not laying down. I'll literally be like moving around. Because, as I've said, I write comics, so you'll literally just see me just acting out scenes while I have like music going in the background. But like I'm not actually writing.
So that I get what someone else has done is helped you think about how you embrace this idea. And remember, this is always something that's growing and developing. So how about anybody else report out what you hear, what you share about this idea?
I'll go ahead and go. So my group, we talked about flow and more than just writing. Like someone talked about playing guitar, writing music. Natalie talked about like just watching TV and like getting into a show or a movie. And I think that made me think about like flow and other aspects too, instead of just writing, because I know I struggle with finding the flow in writing. Like I'll write for maybe 10 minutes and then I'm done, kind of thing. So I do it in short intervals and I don't really have the flow anymore, but I think I've found it in other things. So I'm hoping to bring that kind of energy back to writing.
As an artist, I get like into a flow with drawing or doing a paper cutting, and I get really distracted by what I'm doing, and it's hard to distract me otherwise from what I'm doing, and I completely tune out people, and like I can hear you speaking, but I'm not really paying attention to what you're saying. And then my boyfriend sometimes gets annoyed with that, and he's like, "Hey, did you hear what I said?" I was like, "Wait, what?"
So the idea here is, I'm looking at the some of the content from the chapter, and it's that talks about, you know, what psychologists who study creating brain identity, they're looking for this state in which work happens. So how do you get in that state in which work happens? And for some people, I heard it like, oh, it happens, and when I'm in it, this is my experience. But maybe you haven't thought about like how you can create the environment, how can you create a state for yourself in which work can actually happen. So I think a lot of us have a natural state of flow. Like I know how I could like find myself in that mode, but how do I actually create that state? And that might be something as writers or anything that you're doing, how do you create the state in which you can have flow on your terms versus it taking over you and possessing you because it just happened. That's what tends to happen to me, is I'll get an idea and everything else in my life will disappear and I'll get sucked in. That's not necessarily good. I might produce work, but it's not consistent. And it's not something that I have. I mean, I'm still working on that a lot because I would like to produce work more consistently. I would like to have flow work for me versus it take over me, if that makes any sense. So part of this may be thinking about what happened, where you are when you are able to produce work. And then how can you manage that? How can you get that to work for you as a writer? I see there a few hands up. If your group didn't go, you can either piggyback of what's been said or you can move on. Does that make sense? You can see my face, and my face goes through all these expressions because I do it. Please say something. Alyssa, did your group go?
No, I don't think so, unless I like just missed it.
Well, now it's on you. Anything.
So I thought it was interesting because me and a couple other group members were talking about how it's hard for us to get into a flow with writing, but like with reading or like other activities, we can like easily get lost, like you said, like possessed in like this flow. But another one group member, Lydia, she said that it's so hard. Like she always is writing. She always gets lost in the flow. So it was just like interesting to see the difference between the group.
Okay. And it's possible that the things that you do get lost in, where other things disappear, those things that you do get lost in, if you take some time to pay attention to how that's structured, and maybe it's something, a habit that you can put into another aspect or another place in your life. And because it's work. So thinking about the work of that. I see hands still up. If you are good, you can put your hand down. And otherwise, all right. Alicia, your hand's up. You want some to add, or are we good? All right, then magically the hand goes down. All right, I'm gonna go back to share my screen here if I can get my mouse to do what I want it to do here. Okay, so I do believe on, because we're only have like 20 minutes or so of class time left. So as we think about what the practices that you've done so far, and I do just want to clarify, some of these practices are intense and they ask for a lot. You're not going to finish them. They're meant for you to work on throughout the course of the semester. So if something asks you for 25 or 15 and you can only come up with 7, you got started. And if that's—
So we're supposed to just submit what we started then? You just want to see that we started?
Well, so for example, there are 15, I think, 15 practices in chapter 2. I want to see, yes, you got 15 started. You may not have finished them because, and you may not ever finish all of them because there's this one practice in there that asks about, I don't know, it asked me to list something and I just couldn't do it for the life of me. I got like 6 things and I'm not just gonna sit there and just keep racking my brain. It'll come up, it's in chapter 2. And I never finished it, but I went back at a later point, but I never got the total number that they need. I didn't need it. I needed to get as much as I could.
Wait, was submitting something today?
No, it's due Sunday.
Oh.
No, we're just, I'm just clarifying that I know some of these practices will ask you for a list of items. You don't need to force yourself to do all 25 or 75. It's meant for you to work on as you go. But when you submit the practice chapter when it's due, I need to see there were 15 items and you got started on them. Some of them will be completed. Some of them is someone you may go overboard with and do a whole lot for. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I do have 2 questions about this. About the practices. Do you want me to wait until after you're done, or?
No, because what I was doing now is I was just going to actually talk a little bit about the reading in the practices in chapter 2 anyway. So we can go ahead and ask questions at this point, or so go ahead, shoot your question.
My first one is, with practices, they do not include the writer's tips or the questions to ask. Does it?
No, they're only the ones that come in a little box that says practice.
Right. And there's a certain one that I do have a question over.
All right, chapter 1 or 2?
Chapter 1.
Okay, what is it?
Page 15, the bring in one of your favorite pieces of creative writing one.
Oh, I think, is that the one we did where you have to read out loud?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm just confused about one thing. So do we have to like find our own thing we did in the past, or just like find any poem that we know?
I think that's the practice I did at the, is that the second one that I did at the beginning? This one right here? Ah.
Yeah, I guess I'm just I guess I just didn't know if like you had any experience with that one, or like, yeah, because honestly, I guess I'm just kind of bad with trying to memorize stuff like that.
Oh, you mean the one that it asks you to memorize a piece?
No, not that.
Is it this one that I have on the screen?
Yeah, I guess I was just confused I guess I was just confused.
Oh yeah, so this is the one I started class with, and that's when I had you listen to We Real Cool. So for the
Yes,
ones that ask, oh, go ahead.
so just try to find one and just have someone look at it.
Well, yeah, so that's why I demonstrated this at the start of class. So I found a poem that I like. It's a favorite. It's not you wrote it, so a favorite. It could be something that you've written, but I found a poem that I like by Gwendolyn Brooks, and so I made like I said, I made my daughter and my husband listen to it, and I asked them these questions because we can't reproduce everything in class. So some of these practices, guess what you're gonna have to do, creative writing people? You're gonna have to be creative.
Yeah, yes, yes. Sorry, I was confused though.
Oh, yeah, no, because we're not gonna be able to do all of these in class. So you have to automatically customize. And so I started class with this one because I thought it was an odd one, and people like, well, what do I do? Like my family and friends are used to me asking them to do stuff. So I just explained it to them and say, hey, do you see any images? What they are, what are they? And then I moved on with my life. And I picked a poem that I liked. So that's the idea that you're doing. So are there any other questions? So this first chapter, is really about getting us into thinking about our process and what we do. Coming up, it's about generating ideas. So for those of you who don't have a problem with generating ideas, this may have been tedious for you. But some of us have a hard time generating ideas or just getting outside of the subject matters that we're most familiar with. So I think last class we did the Rambo activity. Some people don't have a hard time with just letting loose and letting their brains go and do stuff. And so I ask you to do all the practices because I don't know what every person's strengths and weaknesses are. And sometimes you may not even know what your strength and weaknesses may be. So doing all these practices kind of helps you fill those things out. But the idea for chapter 1 is you will be able to come back to what you've done, these practices in chapter 1 for ideas. Because it's full of just keep creating lists and things like that. Makes any sense. So it's like our generating ideas chapter. And then 2, what I want us to start to think as we move into Thursday's class is what we're going to talk about. So I would like to have a discussion about chapter 2, which is about reading. So as creative writers, we need to read. And chapter 2 practices actually are getting us into creative reading. So what does that mean for you? What does it look like for you? What kind of tools do you use as a creative reader? Do you have any techniques? And the last question here says, are you collecting any techniques? I know we haven't done much. You have chapter 2 and yourself. So what kinds of creative reading techniques do you have? And I want you to think about collecting those as we go throughout the semester. So for example, there's a section in chapter 2 that talks about annotating. And that's when you literally just take notes on the document or the text in front of you. You are having a conversation with that text. If you ever have this kind of conversation with the text, like if this is your habit of annotating the things that you read, can you go to like the participants and just say yes? Yes or no? Do you already do this kind of conversation? Because chapter 2 is going to talk about like annotating, and that is a specific way of reading. So, and the participants, yes or no? And if it's no, this is one of these, it's a technique that I think you might want to pay attention to. Do you use annotating when you're looking at your own work? So for example, I save way too many versions of my document. what I'm working on. I have version 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, however many it goes. I'm still waiting. So yeah, yes or no? Do you use this? I'm trying to bring it over to the screen. Bear with me. It's not doing what I want it to do here. All right, well, it's not letting me bring it up on the screen, but so in the creative reading chapter, it talks about close reading, reading something multiple times, reading aloud. If you don't read aloud, I'm going to tell you start practicing now, because you're going to have to do that in our sessions, in our workshops. Please do what I want you to do. Okay. All right, I just wanted to bring in this section for chapter 2. So it is this part here. I am a fan of annotating. And it is one of these reading practices that a lot of people just sort of overlook. And so you can annotate and just basically have a conversation with the text, just you asking questions, trying to answer them. It helps when we come to class. This technique is going to be very useful for giving each other feedback. So if you're not an annotator, I want you to make sure you take some time with any practices in chapter 2 that ask you to do that. So our discussion on Thursday is going to be about what kind of creative reading practices do you have? And we are going to look at one specific practice. So if I can find it. Oh, there it is. We're going to talk about this practice, which is a short piece of fiction. So make sure you have your notes about this one. And I'm just trying to give you a heads up because I know everybody won't be done with everything in chapter 2 by Thursday. So hopefully you can get through to where there's smoke 1. We're going to talk about that. And so the questions for things are in the wrong order. So questions for next class, these are the things about reading, and then I'm going to ask you to be prepared to discuss the writing project that you completed from chapter 1, and then the Jennifer Hickson practice. And I just put a link here on Blackboard that will take you to the site where she reads it, so you don't have to go look for it. So it's there if you've not got to that practice yet. So to that end, I'm going to bring, it lets me, chapter 1 back on the screen. So at the end of every chapter, you have a writing project. You have a choice of several writing projects. And so there are a bunch of practices that you should be doing. The most important, culminating in the practice of a longer piece of writing, and that's these writing projects. And so this, yes, please, when you choose one, you're choosing it to complete it to the best of your ability. So the idea is that the practices culminate in any one of these writing projects. So what would be helpful today when you sign off, because we have the last 10 minutes of class. So when you sign off with your exit thought, if you already know which one you completed or which one you plan on completing, that would be useful for me, because when we discuss the writing projects, I can put you into groups based on the writing projects that people created. So it won't be completely random. So I'm asking in your exit, go ahead and put your exit, but also give me the number of chapter 1 writing project that you have or plan to do. And that's why I have them on the screen here. And in our last 9 minutes of class, we're opening it up to discussions, or before you go away and sign off, Pick one of these things. It will just make it a lot easier that when we get started with our discussion, I can already preset these groups. So I just want to reiterate, practices, do them to the best of your ability. The writing projects, yes, make sure you do them in completeness, because these are the pieces that you will return to. So at the end of the semester, when you submit your final poem and your final fictional piece, they should come from writing you did this semester, not something that you already came to class with. So you are creating something new here.
Ignore the exclamation points. I just really like number 1.
Okay.
You don't know it yet, but that plays to my strengths.
And again, these practices, this is where you can be audacious. I'm not grading these. These are discussions. These are places for you to take chance and risks. So don't freak out about it. Just let yourself complete it. So hopefully that makes sense. I'm gonna just bring both my screens up here if I can. So I do have office hours today. Oh. And so on Thursday, where's my, I do not know why this order is keep being weird here. So anyway, this is where we're gonna start our discussion on Thursday. Otherwise, thank you. It was less bumpy today, and I expect our experience to get less and less bumpy. By week 3, we should be smooth with it. And you all had the opportunity to see me just pop into your groups. I just spent today popping into groups to see how that works.
Popping.
All right, I'm going to stop this recording.